Welcome back to Neuroconvergent Leadership, where we talk about leadership, communication, and neurodivergence. I'm Jeremy Doran. I help great engineers become great leaders. Have you ever been an informal leader, meaning you have the responsibility to lead, but you don't necessarily have the power to enforce anything? Being a leader without being an actual manager can be an extra challenge and requires a lot of skills. Today we have a very special guest. I've known her since she was born, Hannah West. Welcome to Neuroconvergent Leadership.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. I'm so excited.
This is exciting for me as well. And one thing that spurred me to think of inviting you is I'm writing a book and I talk about leadership a lot. And then I was talking about informal leaders and I was thinking about captains on sports teams. And I immediately thought of you because you are about to go off to college where you got a scholarship for lacrosse. And I suspect it's partly because you're really, really good at lacrosse, but part of it is surely the leadership role that you played. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So I went to Moses Brown High School, and I was on the girls basketball team and the girls lacrosse team, and I was a 3-year captain on the basketball team and a 1-year captain on the lacrosse team. So they definitely do look for that in recruiting when you're going to look at different schools. And they also just look for how you act on the field with your club team as you travel with them as well.
Got it. So let's start with basketball. You said you were a 3-year captain. Why were you captain for 3 years? That seems very early to be put into that sort of position.
Yes, so my sophomore year, we had 2 captains. They were both seniors. They were great, but both of them suffered basically career-ending injuries within the first game. So we had to elect 2 new captains, and we didn't really have a lot of juniors or seniors on the team. So the next kind of best thing was myself and then another girl who was a junior at the time. So that's just kind of how it played out, and so I ended up being a captain for the remainder of that season. And it was also just kind of in part as to we were not very good at basketball my sophomore year. And I had played before, and not a lot of the other girls had, so they kind of looked to me at the time. That kind of changed my junior and senior years. We got a lot better, but that's kind of how I ended up being captain my sophomore year.
So you had that thrust upon you pretty suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times when someone's a captain, they almost lobby for it or it's expected. What were some of the things that you had to learn on the fly because you weren't necessarily expecting to be in that role?
So a lot of it, I remember I was super quiet my freshman and sophomore year, especially on the lacrosse team. And on the basketball team, the team's a bit smaller, which makes it easier to talk and stuff. But I was always very quiet and just kind of played and let whatever I was doing on the court sort of speak for itself. But when you had a whole team of girls looking to you to make decisions and help them out, you obviously have to use your voice a lot more, not only on the court, but to ask for coach to do this for us or set up different things. So that was kind of my main struggle, was myself to be okay, I actually have to talk to everyone and I have to direct traffic, which I think was good for me as a 15-year-old, because I learned a lot as it was thrust upon me, like you said.
Learning to do that early is so valuable. A lot of people, myself included, I'm about as introverted a person as I know, and learning to speak in public or speak up was something that a lot of people struggle with. Are there any other things that were traits of yours that either helped you be a good captain or that you had to make adjustments for?
I think what helped me be a good captain was I had other leadership roles. I was younger, but in middle school I was basketball captain. Kind of just little things like that that sort of added up to where I could kind of pull something together. Also I was very, very close with the senior class at the time, and so they kind of helped me navigate being a captain, being in a leadership role. I think what hurt me was not only being quiet, but just kind of not being very mature. I would just sometimes goof off at practice, or I wasn't on all the time. I know I was always being watched and everyone would follow what I was doing, but I wasn't locked in all the time to the point where I probably should have been, because I was just younger and not expecting to be in that role. So I kind of had to learn maturity too.
Excellent. You talked about going to the coaches and asking them for things. Were there any times when you had to kind of stand up to a coach and fight for something on the team, or within the team itself and other players?
So my senior year, my junior year as well, we had a lot of issues with our head varsity coaches. So myself and my other captain had gotten a lot of feedback from the team. We had had a lot of team meetings where we were like, okay, we have to go to the athletic director about this. We have to go to the head of our school about this. And that was kind of terrifying because they had coached me for all 4 years. Like I was supposed to, kind of stick by them. But at the end of the day, being a captain means standing up for your team and your girls and standing up for what you know is right. So going to brand new head of your school and saying like we need new basketball coaches was the right thing to do at the time, but it was also just very scary because you don't know how she's going to react. You don't know how the rest of the school is going to react, as we had just won the state championship. But I would say there was definitely a lot of times where I had to stand up to the coaches, or where I had one-on-one meetings with the coaches about what we need from them as a team.
Did you do any coalition building? Like, did you meet with other members of the team and try and get a bunch of people on board, or did you spearhead it on your own? How did that work?
It wasn't really just a me decision to do this. It was sort of, we had a lot of team meetings, we would have team lunches, things like that, and like people would sort of come to me with their concerns, or sometimes they would just text me. But a lot of times, especially like if I was like a freshman or a sophomore, I probably wouldn't have felt comfortable making that big of a change in the school. But because I was the captain and I was pretty close to graduating, I didn't really have as much to lose as the other girls. So it all came from the team and everyone was sort of on board, but a lot of it was being fed through myself and like the other seniors and juniors on the team.
So on the flip side, are there any coaches you had who did things that were excellent and that you emulated?
Yes. So my lacrosse coach for Moses Brown, I've always really liked him. He's one of the people that I think is just a great communicator. He's very upfront and honest about things, sometimes a little bit too honest maybe, but I think he expected a level of maturity from us and he gave that back to us in how he treated us. So I think that he's always been sort of someone that I've emulated. Even just sending an email or having a conversation with someone, he's just very straightforward, gets his point across really well, which I really like.
When you said maybe too honest, what did you mean by that? Is it too blunt or too honest or something different?
He definitely is very blunt, but I wouldn't really fault him for that at all. I think a lot of the girls on the team do seek feedback, and because we're very, very good, and so they do seek blunt feedback from him, which I think is great. But as I've developed a relationship with him over time, I'll make jokes, and I'm like, maybe you shouldn't have said that as a head varsity coach, but I was sort of already out of the program. So his opinions weren't really going to affect anything. But it's just funny because I know him so much better now as just more of a friend than a coach.
So how has that changed the way you communicate with people?
How is my relationship with him?
The recognizing how good a communicator and how blunt he is, but maybe sometimes a little too blunt. How has that changed the way you interact with people?
It definitely has changed a lot. I guess these two situations with the basketball coaches and the lacrosse coach have sort of had an impact on each other, just because I was very, very straightforward and blunt with my athletic director and how I felt about what he was doing, because he wasn't really making a lot of change in the school, and when we would come to him, nothing really would get done. So it was why we had to kind of go over his head and go to the head of the school. But I was very upfront with him in my meetings and my emails. And I think knowing your audience is really important, where some people respond really well to that and respond being, having straightforward, honest conversations. And some people you kind of have to play a role where you maybe don't say all of your opinions at once, but you word it in a way that's not so aggressive, also not as straightforward, and you kind of have to dance around points sometimes.
How long does it normally take you to figure out which approach is going to work with someone?
I think In that specific situation, it took me a little too long. It was kind of too late, but I think usually I can figure it out pretty well. I haven't had a lot of experience in my life having to do that, but especially with being a captain on a team, there's definitely certain girls who need a lot more, you know, positive feedback or like one-on-one conversations, things like that. And then there's some girls who are just kind of there to have fun. So you don't really know, can't really treat every girl the same way. And I think over the course of the season, you figure out what each player needs.
You know the saying, the golden rule. Do you know what that is?
Do unto others as, is it that one?
Yep, that's the one.
Oh, yes. Okay, I do
Yes.
know it then.
So yeah, do unto others as you would have them do to you, basically.
Yes.
But I don't think that's right. I think it's right in the fact that everyone deserves a level of respect and honesty, but you don't treat everybody the same. So I came up with a new rule, and I call it the rhodium rule. I used to call it the platinum rule.
The platinum rule.
I used to call it that, but then gold became more expensive than platinum, so I didn't think that was worth it. So I found the most expensive metal on the periodic table, which happens to be rhodium. And being in Rhode Island, I think it's perfect, so I call
That's
it the
perfect.
rhodium rule. Treat other people
Nice.
the way they want to be treated.
Yeah, I like that. I totally agree with that. Very cool.
It's a good one. So switching from sports to just school in general, you started going to a public school and then you switched to a private school. What were some of the differences that you noticed in terms of the school itself and the people that you were interacting with?
So the main difference that I've noticed was oddly enough, they give you a lot more freedom and they put a lot more trust in your character at private school. So, you have like free time to just do whatever you want and they're not going to tell you you have to go into the library and like work on stuff. Whereas in public school, it was very like systematic and like everything had to be a certain way. Whereas in private school at Moses Brown, it's very like freedom based. The teachers are almost like your friends. And I noticed even though we didn't get yelled at all the time, kids were a lot better behaved and they did their work. They were more apt to do their work at private school compared to where I was in public school, which is interesting.
And what about your interactions with people? And I'm asking this because when I was in high school, I never really found my people.
Yeah.
I never quite felt like I fit in until I was in college, and then there was just so many more people. I could find people that fit.
Yeah.
Did you find a difference in the way you fit in at the public school versus private?
I definitely struggled a lot just because I was going to a new school. So when I was in public school, I had been going to school with the same kids since I was like 5. So you kind of just are kind of friends with everyone sort of, and you may not get along with everyone. But I remember I still have like 2 or 3 really good friends from there that have sort of stuck with me. But going to Moses Brown was in the middle of the pandemic, so I really struggled my first 2 years in just like making friends or like knowing which friends were actually my friends, if that makes sense, and who weren't like kind of just there to like be there. And I sort of made my like, best friends like, junior and senior year, and they weren't necessarily kids that I played sports with or had a lot in common with, but I ended up fitting in with like a crowd that I wasn't so used to fitting in with because most of my friends in like middle school were kids I just played basketball with or played lacrosse with. So
sometimes people who are not like you are the ones you become best friends with.
It's true.
For instance, your dad and I are very, very different, and we're very,
That is
very good
true.
friends.
That is true.
And some people are surprised. They're like, you guys are friends? Yes.
Yes, we are.
Talking about people you do or don't get along with, were there any people on your teams when you were a captain who you particularly struggled with?
When I was freshman, there was a senior on the basketball team, and she was the captain, and I was new to the school, new to the team or whatever, and we just did not get along. Like, she just did not like me very much, and it really kind of hurt the way that she treated the rest of the team as well, because she had to be a captain, but she was acting so immature, so people started not to trust her as much and not really go to her, and they would always go to the other captain. So that was one person that I didn't really get along with. I've never really had too much of not getting along with anyone when I was a captain.
So there maybe weren't people who you didn't get along with as a captain, but were there any who were challenging to get on board?
Yeah, when people have a lot of emotions and they're very, very emotional, I'm just not great at handling that. And I remember there was this one player who I'm actually very good friends with now, but when she was like younger, she would always come up to me just like in tears after games, and I had no idea why she was upset. I was like, dude, like we just want, like I had no idea how to deal with that. So that was definitely a challenge that I faced, was like talking her sort of off her own ledge. I didn't really understand how to handle girls who were super emotional, but I knew that they cared, but I just didn't know how to be a good captain to them all the time.
So what did you do?
I kind of just, asked them what was wrong. I would ask other players on the team who were very good friends with them a lot of the time to go check in on them, because sometimes it's like when I'm going up to talk to someone who's upset, it's like, okay, I know you're doing this because you're the captain, you kind of have to. So I would like secretly be like, hey, why don't you go check in on her? And a lot of times that person would know what to do more than I did, which I think was kind of a decent strategy, was to sort of delegate.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect strategy, because there are some times when you're just not going to be able to do it.
Yeah,
and finding
there was just
someone who
sometimes. Yeah. So yeah.
Wonderful. So we've been talking for a little while. I've asked you a lot of questions, so I'm going to flip it on you. Are there any things you learned by being a captain that you'd like to share?
I think just being sort of going back to the rhodium rule, knowing what each player sort of needs from you, because it's not going to be just a blanket like, I'm really good at cheering my teammates on. It's going to be, I can talk to this person, I can help them with this and XYZ. So just sharing your knowledge and sharing your wisdom, but sort of differently between girls or players on the team.
Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to start wrapping this up, but I have three questions that I ask everybody. The first is, where's a place that you have been and loved? And part B is a place you have not yet been but are wanting to go.
Okay, so part A, I'm really a big fan of Upper New England, like the tiny little Vermont like towns. So one of the places I really liked is there's this like very small town right on the side of like Killington Mountain, that I think is really cool. It has like live music and like different things. And then the next day you get to wake up and you get to go skiing. So that's probably one of my favorite places to go. Part B is I really want to go the western part of the country. I'm really curious about Colorado, Oregon, and seeing the national parks as well. So that's kind of on my bucket list to do.
Have you been to any national parks yet?
I've never been to a national park, and I'm very curious about them, and I want to go very badly. So
yeah, I really want to go to Yellowstone before the whole thing blows up in a geyser.
Yeah.
So the second question is, who do you think is a great communicator, whether you know them personally or just a historical figure?
I'm going to actually go back to my lacrosse coach for this, but a different lacrosse coach. So I played for a club team called Revolution Lacrosse, and my sort of head coach for that, he's actually a motivational speaker as well as being a lacrosse coach. And he just knows how to get players motivated based on who they are. So like for myself, he never yelled at me. He never, was super hard on me. But then there was some other girls on my team where he would yell at them to the nth degree to get them to play well. And it ended up working. So I think that he just really knows how to motivate people.
Wonderful. And then the final question is, what is one piece of communication advice that you think we can all benefit from?
I think honesty is really important when it comes to communication. I learned that sort of through my basketball experience, and how you approach getting sort of what the team needs is just being honest and not dancing around anything.
There are some people who you have to dance a little bit with.
But I think at the end of the day, if you kind of don't voice what you need, you're going to regret it in some capacity and it's not going to help out the team. So it might be scary at first, but if you can communicate your honest opinion in a way that is going to work for that specific person, I think that is very important.
Fantastic. Hannah,
Yes.
this has been wonderful. I am quite confident that all of this experience is going to make you very successful at college and
Oh,
life
thank
in
you.
general. Thank you so
Well,
much for
thank
being
you so
here.
much for having me. I was so honored.
This has been fun.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy.